Okay, so we were talking about fault and blame, and I also think of the topic of condemnation and contempt. All these related things. We also mentioned the idea of personal responsibility or personal power. So um, I asked Daniel and Shelley to consider what they think of as possible values to the process of casting blame. What are your initial thoughts? Who wants to go first?
Okay, I guess I'm supposed to go first. Right, how blame works, the function of blame. It certainly does take away personal responsibility and personal power because you're focusing on everything, on all the reasons why you have no power and all the reasons why you have no responsibility, instead of maybe focusing on what your responsibilities or your power is at any given moment. So yeah, it steals away your personal responsibility and personal power. I don't know if those are even two different things, but either way.
Okay, so let me. I'm gonna like just emphasize certain points in what you're saying. So there's a certain amount of power that exists, and then blame is a repressing of the power. That's at least one element that you're bringing up. Okay.
Well, because you're focusing probably away from what you want. I mean, or you're just not, precisely going after what it is you're going, your whatever your desire is, whatever your passion is at that moment. If you're going to blame, there's a passion in the background of that. In my opinion, otherwise you wouldn't even care. Why would you even care to even bring it up unless there's something in the background there's a reason for it. But if you're focusing on the blame, then you're not focusing on the passion. Or, you know what I mean? You follow me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you haven't spoken about yet is the actual social communication of blame from one person to another. So I can tell someone that I blame them, or I can tell someone that I blame a third party. So I just want to bring up those two really obvious options or contrasts. So
Okay.
we do think of blame as something. I think of blame at least mostly as something social. So I can just have an internal conversation about blame, but in addition, there can be that expressed blame. So I just want to bring that up. You want to keep
Okay.
going, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me speak to that.
Uh huh.
But right, obviously, in a situation where we would blame somebody else directly and not a third party, it might be to get their attention onto something that we want to put their attention on. So we can use that. Maybe it's not the most precise or effective way, but we can use that to, control their focus. You know, which in an emotional rant that might happen. As opposed to a mindful conversation, if you get really emotional, you might use blame just to affect their focus, which would be the same thing, I guess, if you're talking to somebody and it's a third party you're blaming, then maybe you're looking for, understanding and acceptance and all those different things.
Okay.
All right? That's what I got.
I got all that. That's cool. I'm making some notes. Okay, you did mention blame as having an emotional component. Do you ever think of blame as something that would just be a um, direct blame without any emotional, any emotion? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as I look at myself now and how I am now, yes, I mean, it can be used in a mindful way, absolutely. So it's not necessarily just emotional, but as I look at, a good portion of my life and maybe some other situations I've been around and experienced, I do see blame as more of an emotional thing. But maybe, see it
right.
without emotion. Yeah.
So we're bringing up this potential contrast of mindfulness and emotionality. And an interesting thing I notice is that emotions tend to have a lot of power, um, and that power may, kind of be like a trade-off where there's a lot of power, but there's not as much precision or there's not as much mindfulness. So there's that trade-off. Shelley, we haven't heard from you. Of course, Daniel has been kind of on a roll, so that's fine. But do you want to comment on anything he said or go in a different direction?
No, not really. I did consider someone blaming themselves. Is that something you would want to discuss? It's
Go for it.
I sort of consider blame I blame myself a lot for a lot of problems that are around me because I feel like I am in control of myself. So if I have any power in this situation, then I can take responsibility for what I'm doing and change it. And so I do that a lot, but I think like Daniel was saying, there's a lot of emotion involved in it for me, and I sort of beat myself up about it, and it cripples me sometimes to even do something about it. And then it can lead to, I get angry that I'm blaming myself so much, and then why isn't anyone else doing about their part? Or you see where I'm going with this?
Yep, I got comments and notes. I keep taking all these notes. So blame can be used, even like self-blame can be used to build up a lot of energy. So I can build up this big emotional concentration of energy or power, and then it gets released however it gets released. But that blame contains expression and sharing, and it builds up like a dam can hold water and a lot of pressure and a lot of power there, and it can be released suddenly, or it can break. The dam can break and it can be released chaotically. You mentioned, Shelley, blame as a crippling thing potentially, like self-blame, and as you were saying, blaming self for problems, I thought of guilt, and so there's a conversation for guilt, or a conversation of guilt tripping oneself. So if we're anticipating guilt and punishment and invalidation and that kind of interaction from other people, we can build up a interior practice or resistance where we want to actually have a degree of resistance before we go to other people, right? So if I blame myself for something, it keeps me like introverted.
Right.
And that is a function of the self-blame or the self-guilt tripping, is to create a seclusion or an isolation, that kind of a thing, even if that's, very brief, that still, that little moment of guilt trip will stop me from making a phone call that I might have made or whatever, right? It actually, and that gets to the broadest thing that I've written down here is interruption. So blame is almost always an interruption. So if I'm blaming myself, I'm interrupting, maybe some desire or whatever. It's you could say repressive, like suppressing my own initiative or something. But blame and that conversation of blame is an interruption, and when done internally, it can be, I think, crippling is it's an extreme word, but it's a relevant word to use. And then in regard to other people, if I'm blaming someone, I'm saying, hey, let's stop the current, or prior momentum, whether that was silence or conversation. Blame tends to interrupt things. So if I say to my wife, hey, you blah, 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 didn't you? I'm making an accusation, and, it's the idea is, it's like a threat. It's an implicit threat, right?
But it changes the focus, is what I meant.
For sure.
An interruption.
For sure.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing, basically.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, we that makes sense. So, we haven't talked a lot about examples of, like, imagine blah 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 blah, and let's look at it. Does anybody think of an example of an instance of self-blame or being blamed by someone else, or one party blaming a third party? It might not involve you, just an act of blame that you've observed. What comes to mind that is interesting enough that you want to comment on? Political things, relationship things, anything? Would you folks like me to create an example? I don't have anything in mind, but I can.
Yeah, I have too many examples to choose from. So.
Okay. Shelley?
Yeah, nothing is really. I mean, I guess a lot's popping into my head, but nothing. I'd rather you use something.
Okay. So I'm going to pick, I think, kind of the gentlest and safest, most comfortable way to begin the example phase would be for me to talk about other people blaming other people, something that doesn't involve any of us, something that none of us will relate to very much. I like to use examples with little kids, so maybe you guys can help me create this example. So one child is blaming another child, or maybe even blaming a pet. That might also be a really kind of acute example of blame. Anything come to mind? The dog ate my homework is the classic story for little kids of casting blame. Why don't you have your homework, little Johnny? Well, I did it, and I'm sure it was all very accurate and very good handwriting. However, my dog ate it. Now, we know that the typical use of this story is cases where the child in question might not even have a dog, right? So it's not that dogs actually necessarily eat the homework. They're telling, the child's telling a teacher as an excuse, I should be given special, special consideration because it's my dog's fault. So in my notes I have here emotional as one way of presenting blame. So the child, in doing that, they're trying to manipulate the teacher, we imagine, emotionally to have sympathy for the child. So the child's inviting sympathy, inviting pity, inviting mercy. We could say inviting understanding, but in the case of the deceptive casting of blame, the child just wants a good grade or whatever. Oh no, don't tell my parents that I didn't do homework. No. I will do it tomorrow. The only reason I don't have it today is the dog ate it, but I'm totally clear on how to do it. I'll get it done. I'll turn it in tomorrow. Right? So they're trying to interrupt or avoid some unfavorable, embarrassing situation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Anything, as I was saying all that, you guys want to jump into another example or any comments about it? About that old example? Have you ever said the dog ate your homework?
No.
Have you ever heard someone actually use that in real life?
No.
It's so well known as an excuse that we have it in stories and so on, but I don't think people actually say it very often.
As a joke, maybe, but that's about it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they don't attempt to actually use it to get out of situations or deceive other people. Yeah, it basically, I assume it was a real thing that, people really tried to use that example. I don't think of it as just created as a joke, but maybe it was just created as a joke.
But maybe that was back in the Commodore 64 days when it took forever to find out if someone had a dog. Now you just go on Facebook, So,
I didn't think of that, but that's important. That's an important note because back in the days before Commodore 64, we could get away with these excuses. So now I say, well, so what's an excuse that, can you guys think of an excuse that you've used, or like casting blame on somebody else as an excuse, something you're willing to just, share real quick? Anything? Let me see what I can come up with. Daniel's really tickled over there. I don't know what's going on. You got something?
I feel like I probably should, but at the moment, I'm not sure,
I'm drawing a blank myself. I should have a lot of examples, but I'm drawing a blank.
I guarantee you I have a lot of examples for anything specific, yeah. At the moment, there's nothing specific, but I imagine that would have been a good question to ask me about, 6 months ago, a year ago.
Uh-huh. Well, I think a classic example for me would be, that one relationship I was in, the one, because there's only been one that fits what I'm about to say. But I was in that.
I was laughing a minute ago, because maybe that's what I thought you were getting at,
Well, check this out though. This is first person. I'm talking for myself. If anybody else can relate, that's fine. So there was this one relationship I was in, and you guys thought I was talking about a romantic relationship, didn't you? No,
yes.
It was an employer. I was an employee of an employer, and that counts as a kind of relationship, sure. Especially if they're distracting me by making fun of my example without saying anything. I can see how you guys are looking at your iPhones. Okay, I can't see your faces, but anyway, I imagine it, and I resent the way that I imagine you were looking at me, so I'm going to change subjects because I'm embarrassed about what I was going to say. No, I'll go ahead and say it. So the relationship that it was ruined by the other person. Okay, great. Now moving on to the other thing is, I was an employee of an employer once, and I had a coworker. Oh, and there were some customers there, and oh my God, the owners of the company. Oh my God, that was such a. I should be given a medal for lasting 6 hours at that job. Any questions?
What is a prick?
What is a prick? Is a type of body part we're talking about here, or?
No, I thought that was a great example. Yeah, that was awesome.
I related to that very well.
Say more. Come on, this is your opportunity. Do you want to say more?
No.
Okay. Daniel?
I actually didn't. I was kidding.
What?
She didn't.
You said 3 things. You said you should be praised for spending more than 6 hours on the job.
Uh-huh.
That's not relatable to me.
Okay. I don't know where Shelley's going, but Daniel, can you save us from whatever that was? I like to make fun of her occasionally because I know no one else ever has, so I want to get her used to that because, I'm going to... All right.
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate to that. I mean, I've had plenty of, situations where I've blamed employers for many things.
Uh-huh.
And no, I haven't had that many, I should say, but there's been a few, again, it's always easier to take that road, or it was easier to take that road,
Right.
Instead of trying to be more powerful, yeah. It's fear-based, I guess. Right, but I mean, relating that to relationships even, yes, it's easier to see that obviously the other person was flawed, or whatever they did was the downfall, yeah, I mean, it's just easier, even though you're repressing at that point. I guess it brings comfort, actually, in a sense. It can bring comfort to say, well, damn, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm perfect over here,
Right.
Going back to that perfectionism, cynicism and all that stuff, and skepticism. Well, it wasn't me. It was her, or him, or my employer, or whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's the school system and the political system and the rich people and the Europeans mostly. So that's the source of all of my problems right there. But back to a serious example of blame. Not it's a light example, but I just mean not a joke. A little kid or myself as a child, if I blame my sister, but I'm telling my mom, then what I'm saying is, I might be saying, "Mom, intervene. Come on, hello," that kind of thing. So I'm going to accuse my sister, but even if I do it to my sister, I might be doing it in earshot of my mom or some other, authority to pull in the authority for assistance or for whatever, in some cases of real distress and real, rage. Like, my sister keeps opening, the door. I don't know. I keep closing my door, and my sister keeps opening it, and it's whatever. Or she keeps letting the dog out, and or she keeps letting the dog in, and I'm trying to do blah 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 blah, and I don't want the dog running in, and my sister keeps letting the dog in. Mom, will you tell my sister to stop letting the dog in? Right? So that's a kind of blame that's related in some ways to the other things we've been talking about. But I just wanted to acknowledge that is again, a pretty straight, direct thing. It's not blaming the dog, because I'm not, going to try and change the fact that the dog's a dog. But my sister could understand if you open that sliding glass door again and let the dog through, then you're going to be spanked, or you're going to be grounded, or you're going to have to blah, 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 whatever punishment, or whatever reward will be withheld. Like, if you can go for an hour without letting the dog in, then we're going to give you some ice cream today. Or Santa's going to give you a big pony. So that kind of blame is simply, I could, I'm imagining myself as that child. I could say to my sister, stop letting the dog in. It's your fault that my homework, blah, 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 and the dog's, running over my homework, which is actually literally possible, right? So I could blame my sister, make a request, and if she didn't comply or whatever, then I can go to the next authority up the line, or I can, go into my room and close the door and spread out my homework on my floor of my bedroom, because in my case I have that option. But I can totally imagine being in a certain room of the house where I grew up. I have a bunch of papers spread out on the floor, and I'm doing something, and I don't want to pick up my workstation and move it into my bedroom and close the door in there. Why? Because I'm already where I am, and it's a lot easier for me as a frustrated, on the edge of tantrum 6-year-old or whatever, or 9-year-old, whatever. I'm going to just ask for mom's assistance. It's actually seemingly logical to me to go the emotional route and attempt to get my mom involved, especially if I don't really want to do the homework. And I guess you guys are aware that in general, when I was assigned homework in elementary school or any other time, I was thrilled. I was so excited.
Good for you.
Couldn't imagine anything more fun than Homework. All right. Not that I wanted to play with my dog or anything, because they're dirty. They've got germs on. They scrape they jump up on your what?
I'm very hungry.
Oh. I don't like dogs. Never have.
What about Super Mario Brothers too? You got to get some of that in,
Well, sometimes I have to say to my mom, look, the only reason I'm playing video games is because I can't do my homework because my sister keeps letting the dog in, which is running across the homework, and that's why I'm playing. That's why I've been playing Tetris for the last 4 hours. Is that clear? Anybody have
that
any?
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, all right. Other kinds of examples of blame. What else did we leave out? Being blamed. Do you want to jump into an example of that? I don't know if this is gonna. I'm thinking of. Oh, here we go. How about blaming oneself? So let's give an example of that. You guys open to that? Great.
Blaming oneself. You said blaming yourself.
Yeah, like blaming yourself. So guilt tripping yourself, blaming yourself. You could do it socially. You could do it internally. I have an example that I can I have to kind of work my way into it, but I have something in mind. Do you guys have anything else you want to put in first?
I have one with my son that not blaming oneself but blaming someone else.
Okay.
He was recently. Keith and I both were driving separate. I was at my mom's house, and Keith came in his car. So we had 2 cars, and I had some of the kids in my Jeep, which I park in the garage, and then he parks in the driveway in his vehicle. And my oldest son and my middle son, I think, were with Keith. So they were horsing around, and they got out of the car, and they were running into the house, so past my car in the garage. And my middle child was being chased by my older son. And my middle child went in the house. My older son reached down to pick up a ball right where my rearview mirror is. And then when he got back up with full speed, he hit his head on the mirror. And he started crying, and we consoled him, asked him if he's okay. And then he says, somebody left this Razor scooter in the way, which was his Razor scooter.
Uh-huh.
And it was, I guess, jutting out into the pathway, and he was mad about it. He was angry that he hit his head, and he got mad that somebody left this in the way, and that's why I hit my head. And I let him be for that. I let that go, and then when he got calmed down about it, maybe an hour later or something, I did talk to him about it, and I asked him if he really thought that was why he hit his head. And I don't know if I made too much of a big deal out of it, but my goal was to let him know he has the power. He doesn't have to look around and figure out some way to blame because he was embarrassed or whatever that he hit his head. It's okay that he did something that caused some sort of consequence on him. And it's okay, a Razor scooter was even laying in the way, but is it necessary to really blame somebody over it? He can see that situation in a more empowered way, I thought. Should I continue?
If you have more, go ahead. It sounds like you might.
Well, I just asked him questions like, is there something that he thought he could have done differently that saved, the pain? And he said that he could have been paying more attention.
Uh-huh.
So that's all.
Yeah.
But I wanted him to see that for himself or lead him in that direction, and I don't know if that was the right thing to do, because it's really difficult in life to me, or agonizing, when you expect certain things to happen perfectly so you don't suffer in any way. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay, so the idea that I should always avoid suffering is
Not
crippling?
not always, but if there's a point of view that you can take where you can be more in control of whatever suffering has happened, I think that that's what we should take. And maybe I'm encouraging self-blame. Maybe that's what I did.
Okay, and I get, as you were sharing your story, that you're giving us a real example with real, like, emotional energy now for you. So thank you. In addition to the sharing you just did, like if you take a moment and catch your breath if needed, do you have any requests for, like, particular kind of input or a question you want to share with us?
I guess just your point of view, if that's the right way to handle it.
Okay, what would I tell you? What do you imagine that I would say to you if you asked me, was that the right way to handle it? Shelley?
I would suspect that maybe I made a bigger deal out of something that wasn't a big deal. It could have just
You think
been
that I would
what it is.
say to you that you made a bigger deal out of something than you should have?
I would say you would say that go with your instincts, which she did. So that would be that's what I think JR would say.
Okay. Also, that I may have encouraged him to blame himself.
Okay, which is implicitly the wrong thing to do, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So you may have encouraged him to blame himself, which was the wrong thing to do, and therefore, the wrong thing for him to do, and the wrong thing for you to do, right? So that's one way to look at it. So I can acknowledge that. I don't think that has any priority for me, though we can look at it if you want. But, like, to me, I can tell you what I wrote down. Maybe I wrote down 4 words.
Okay.
Daniel, do you want to interject anything before I do that?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so as you're telling the story, Shelley, I wrote down ashamed, and I guess I'll just tell you the words, and then I can tell the interpretation of why I wrote what when. Ashamed, repress grief, and guilt. So those are the 4 words. Do you have any comment on that so far? Or question?
No.
Okay. Daniel?
No.
Daniel, do you have any speculation why I picked out those themes?
No, I'm just going to listen.
Okay. Shelley? Why did I write that? What do you think?
The emotional charge that was in my storytelling.
Okay. I wrote ashamed, repress grief, and guilt. So you're saying that could apply to you. That you were ashamed, that you were repressing grief, and that you experienced guilt? Right? That's what you're saying now?
Yeah.
Okay. So that could fit. That's not what I had in mind, or that's not exactly what I had in mind. That's there's an element of that, but that's not really the primary thing. Go ahead, Daniel.
You're talking about his son, then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he hurt himself, right?
Right.
He was ashamed that you said he was crying, right?
Yeah.
And so he's of an age of boy, of young person, but in his case, male, meaning boy. So he could have a practice of contain the display of pain. Don't let it show. As a young man from Tallahassee, my projection in this story is it's useful for him to be able to hide tears, to hide pain, all that kind of stuff. And it's also useful for him to be able to display it. And so, in this case, you, Shelley, his mother, give him an opportunity to say, tell his story of it. You came back an hour later or whatever it was, and invited him to reframe it further, and re-explore further. So, what do you think, Shelley? Hearing what I just said, what's your experience or whatever?
Well, that fits his personality for sure, that he would want to hide any kind of pain or tears or anything like that. And I see what you're saying about guilt and all that, and how it came up and how it translated in the way he reacted.
You see how guilt translated into how he reacted? Okay.
Well, the shame and the repressed grief.
Uh-huh.
I definitely see that. The guilt, I'm not exactly sure on that one.
That's the one where it was more like my sense that even as you were telling us the story, that there was guilt present for you.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
those 3 words that you wrote down, one related to me?
Yeah, ashamed,
Okay.
then repressed guilt, and those are in a box. And then outside of that box, I wrote the word below it. Last, I wrote guilt, and that was
Okay,
more
got it.
about the like you in telling the story got to explore your own concern for guilt. Did I do it wrong? Did I do it right? That's pretty obvious by the end of your commentary that you were talking in a framework of concern for guilt, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because this, I guess the blame thing is something that is pretty regular with him in particular. It's, my brother made me do this, or I was trying to do this, and then so-and-so came in and disrupted me, or, so that's why I kind of addressed it as a whole. I don't necessarily pick up on every instance of that, but I did in this case. And I certainly I don't want to cause the reverse. I don't want to cause him to blame himself for everything either. And I'm worried that that's what I did. I have not picked up on anything since then, because I wasn't, I don't want to flip-flop what's going on and cause internal struggles for him or internal blame.
So internal struggles is the broader theme that you've brought up, right? You've brought it up in relation to one of your sons in particular, but we can all relate to internal struggle. You could think internal struggle is something that I occasionally experience as well, right?
Right.
Or, in this specific case, there's a kind of internal struggle that you've now externalized in talking, right? Do you get that? So, and I don't know, you may have actually, as of right now, no sense of struggle. For me, there's no sense of struggle with this. What I get, I'm going to ask Daniel, I'm going to put him on the spot here, but I could tell you what I get from your speaking, and it's not struggle. I get that that's what's going on the surface, or has been going on, but what I get is something else. So, Daniel, what do you what do you pick up from her as she's talking about this, or what do you experience for yourself?
Well, it's just a very emotional subject for her. To make sure that she doesn't want to lead him, down the wrong road. So I get maybe she's a little bit skeptical in the way she's doing things, but I think she's also at the same time confident that she's doing the right thing, but might second guess herself a lot. That's what I'm getting.
Okay. Shelley, do you want to respond to that?
I don't feel like I feel confident. I feel like I'm addressing things from my perspective and imposing it on him. Is kind of how I feel, that maybe it's that was a normal response, and I'm the one who's sensitive to blame or, blaming someone else or something. I'm sensitive to that, and I imposed it on him.
Okay, that sounds more right.
Because that's the way I view things. Like, it's more empowering to me to think, okay, I didn't really like the way that played out. So what can I do differently next time? Rather than say, okay, if this person did this differently or that person did that differently, or,
So you're setting yourself up to learn. You're trying to learn. Right. Is that what you mean?
I'm trying to encourage him. What I was ultimately getting at is trying to encourage him to help his perspective and where he's more empowered in situations rather than expecting everything to be done for him or feeling entitled. But it's such a tiny little example. It sounds stupid to me that I even try to use this little thing as a bigger life lesson for him.
Okay, so you feel like weird about bringing that as much attention to that particular subject as you did? Is that what you're saying?
To you guys, or
no,
to him?
To him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he got it, or I dramatized it, which is something I'm sensitive to anyway, as you guys know in past discussions. I certainly don't want him to agonize over what he did wrong, in situations.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if I encourage that as well, or if I continue down this road, if I will be encouraging that.
Okay. So you got your questions, and your questions are tangled. They're not really clean, focused questions. There's a tangle of question that you have. So it's not
right.
just skepticism. There's other elements in it. Or there's not just curiosity, at least. So you invited him to reflect. It's one way we could say it.
Yeah.
And so let's see. Let me back up. So the thing that I got from your sharing, this is going back a few minutes, before I asked Daniel, what did he think and what was his experience. The main thing I got this, that there's an anxiety for you, that you're able to explore as a mother. Like in the context of mothering, you get to explore your own confidence, let's say, So that's fine, and you can kind of just acknowledge, not necessarily that specific child, but, the life context of being a mother as it's calling you forward into exploring confidence, right? The context of being a mother is like making it a priority for you to develop confidence further from whatever your starting point has been.
That's absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's that. That's not really the thing. That's the thing that's more like on the surface, super obvious. The thing that I actually experience as a like where the power is you just love your son. Like that's all over your speaking for me.
Well, good. That's exactly right too. You nailed it.
And so because of you're actually, so check this out. This is pretty cool. Because of the power of your love for your son, it's completely, disoriented you occasionally, at least, with what's the right thing to do and how's the best way to do this. Because you have this huge, investment in learning, right? Why are you so interested? Because this is your son, right?
Right.
So, or you don't ever necessarily process why. You just get the intensity and the power of the emotion in the background. So there's a powerful emotional background, and with that power, then you have to go and deal with logic, and we have to process blame, and we have to, or we have the opportunity to reflect back on, did I do it right, and how could I do it better, and how could Shelley say it better next time, and how could the child, not hit his head, or whatever. All these different, kind of how to make the future okay. And I'll maybe come back to using that language in that way. But we've got this future that's implicitly not okay, and how do we make it okay? And the background of that entire kind of conversation is, love. So, Shelley, you want to comment on that further? Or?
No, I completely agree with you. That's a really, I guess, that's exactly what was driving me. That was the underlying emotion there.
And I've got another twist that I just picked up, and I do want to say it before I offer Daniel an opportunity, but I'm going to offer you one anyway, Daniel, just with the note that I have something hot. You want to jump in or not?
Nothing to say, no.
Okay, cool. Because, you can maybe, if you had something, you could hold on for a second. But, so, you didn't want to cry. That's what I just got. Is you,
Correct.
huh?
Okay.
So you didn't want him to be hurt. There was the grief for you and that, concern, I don't want him bumping his head in the future either. But it's odd because that's not in the surface of the conversation, But you wanting for his well-being, you want him to be, able to express emotions and able to express emotions with you. And also you want the household and the family to go well. So it's, if he's going to blame anyone, blaming one of his brothers is not ideal, you would right? So there's all those little or big details. But the other really obvious thing is he hit his head and he hurt. He was so one thing that you could experience is just being in grieving with, in this case, him. That's the example that we're thinking of. But just being with your own grieving, to spread it to Daniel or anybody, any human, to just be with our own grieving and the grieving of other people, to be with physical pain. Physical pain is a real possibility, and it is a great way to learn. You hit your head a few times like that, and you reprogram your neurology. It's pretty reliable that way. That's what the pain signals are for. So, Daniel, comments?
No.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Shelley?
No, that's great.
So, is it okay to display grief, and what's a good way to do it? And if I'm lacking confidence, what are good? What's the best way to do things if I have questions about parenting or blah 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 blah? So they have this whole realm of things, and Daniel and I, as you know, are expert parents, and based on our we actually were ranked by People Magazine amongst the top 10 fathers in the entire world. So just so you know who you're talking to, we think you're doing a pretty good job. Pretty good. And
I'll take pretty good from you guys.
And actually, that was Mike Madden. That wasn't me.
Oh, all right. So, yeah, it's the question, the inquiry of what works for me and what works for my family or for my child, that's the inquiry that is there. Now, that's pretty far off the original subject of blame, but that's totally fine. With me, it's totally fine. If it's fine with y'all, it's fine with me. And we can get back to this thing about, blame and guilt tripping and so on. I was offering to give an example of me guilt tripping myself before Shelley gave this example of the one son blaming the other. So before I transition into that, or I'm offering to transition to that. Anybody want to, make any other comment?
I appreciate you guys listening to that. That was something that bugged me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's good. I was actually talking to Daniel. I'm not going to say a lot about this, but we were bringing up the subject of women and the importance of, maybe Daniel will say something a little different than me, but the importance of women and just, talking, basically. Where men, in many cases, men in a relationship need my experience, at least, is that there are times when I need a lack of interaction so that I can process things. And then there are I guess we'll just say it this way. So there are times when I need a lack of interaction, like a space, to not process things consciously. And then there's also a time when I really value socializing. I value sharing. I value listening. I value joking around with Daniel, Shelley, whoever it may be. So there's this range of things where, as I'm going through the disorientation of being overpowered by love or whatever it may be, as I'm going through this series of disorientations called learning, called life, occasionally I really need to make room for me to have privacy and quiet. Occasionally I need room for humor. Occasionally I need to process with somebody. I need to say, I have an issue with blah, 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 and I want to talk to one person. Typically for me, it's one person. I want to talk to one person in a confidential kind of counseling kind of way, and I like to talk. I don't like to chat on Facebook or something. I'd rather phone or in person or something like that. So those are all just kind of maybe minor points relative to our primary theme, but anyway, points that I think to bring up. So, anyway, comments, questions on that?
Yeah, I suppose I don't do a very good job of sharing, some of those moments where I'm very frustrated, and I might be able to just talk to somebody, whoever that is. I probably don't reach out. I'm not much to reach out and feel, I don't know. So I probably don't handle those moments very well,
Yeah. You might not even really have much of a radar, so to speak, for like when to do that. It's something to consider. If it's useful for people sometimes to reach out and process things, then what works for me? And in my experience, Daniel, is that you do it, but you do it in indirect ways. I've seen it. You've done it with me. So, you can, and you can. It's just you might not very often. It's also nice to do it a little more than you need to. Like to plan it and to reach out a little more than you need to. Whatever you think is how much you need to do it a little more than that.
So a buffer zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, impose yourself on your social network just a little, and deliberately and attentively. Like notice I'll put it in first person, if I want more than what I'm getting from any particular person or group of people or whatever, then the next option is I can hire somebody to be my dedicated listener, my counselor, my whatever. Like there's a whole set of options that I have. To me, the thing of when we do these calls and I record them, generally I listen to them for extra learning. I don't know what I get specifically listening back to a recording we've made of a live conversation, but I do it a lot, so I must get something out of it. Daniel, you have did you have something to share?
No, I'm just enjoying what you're sharing. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Shelley?
No, also enjoying it. Thanks.
Yeah, and again, we have the recordings also. For instance, for Shelley to listen to this again, or for anybody can listen to this and might get some benefit from it, including the three of us. In the future we can get more benefit. So I had a story about the guilt tripping thing, or kind of the excuse, like making an excuse around myself. So this is discontinuous with some of what we were just talking about. So I wanted to give, a nice transitional gap. But I'm going to note the words I wrote down again. Ashamed, repressed grief, and guilt. They carry really well into this next conversation. Where, and the example I had in mind was in a relationship where I wanted the relationship to end, and I wasn't taking initiative about it. I wasn't even, I'm okay with this relationship ending. That's not even where I was coming from. So this is not, I was talking to Daniel about a prior recent relationship earlier today. It's not that one. I'm going back a lot further back in time. And there have been times when I felt really guilty about the prospect of leaving a romantic relationship in that case. Okay, so there's romantic relationship, there's this sense of this isn't working very well, and guilt for even being disappointed. So you got all that?
Yes.
So I'm ashamed, I'm repressing my own grief, I do not want to express it to other people, whatever. So I'm buffering things with like, oh yeah, this relationship it's okay, but if I could just blah 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 blah, if I could just stop blah blah blah, or if I could just be more blah 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 blah, then if I just earn more money, like that was relevant. Well, that wasn't that relevant to that relationship, but it was like, let me try and give you guys like a real version of what was going on, so I can maybe pull some of the actual emotion into the interaction here. It's like I should be better at communicating. I think that's a really straight thing. So my relationship would have been saved if I was just a better communicator. And that was a real, like, sincere, repeated commentary that I made, or that kind of thing is what I would have said some years ago, and I was absolutely sincere. I should be a better communicator, and if I could only be a better communicator, then this relationship would work out, and it should. And that's where I was coming from. There's a background of distress with all these things that should be that aren't, or should be that might not be, that are in question. So my sense is the relationship worked however well it worked, and didn't work as in the ways it didn't work, and eventually it dissolved or collapsed or crashed or whatever verbs we want to put with it. Or all of those. And, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to embarrass the other person. Right now, as I tell you guys this story, I don't want to be embarrassed, because embarrassed is the wrong thing to be. I don't want to experience guilt. I don't want to project guilt or blame on other people. No, it wasn't her fault. She was an angel. Oh, no, it wasn't her. I should have been better at communicating. Not her, me. Now, the reality is, I also said at the same time, she should be better at communicating. I totally blamed her. At the same time as I had my own guilt trip on myself, I was totally guilt tripping her just to, disclose the reality of the history. It wasn't like I was only internalizing blame. I was resentful. I was, a variety of things, passive aggressive, whatever, directly arguing. This is the relationship that was like punctuated by arguments. With my recent prior girlfriend, Cara, I would say that she would try to argue with me, but I just didn't cooperate very much. I wasn't really willing or whatever I wasn't hooked into arguing in the sense of really arguing. Like I would actually talk to her sometimes, but I wouldn't really argue. And I think with the relationship that I was thinking of, I've been talking about here otherwise, I was really inclined to argue a lot. I would start arguments, I would cast blame, openly, and in addition to all that stuff, there was this big background of this should work, and I should be better than I am. Better at what? At communicating. At I should have more money than I do. That's a universal almost for me. Historically, how much money I have, I should have more. If you ask me at the time, not enough. What are my communication skills at whatever time? Not good enough. So there's this ongoing conversation of I'm not good enough. So I didn't plan to get to that little nugget, but consider that I'm not good enough is a huge, an extremely frequent, point of reference in human conversations. Whether we get it from modern institutions or whether it's been around 20,000 years or 4,000 years, I'm not good enough is the basic lack of confidence, shyness, embarrassed, skeptical, or maybe not skeptical, reserved. Like that's all corresponds to I'm not good enough. My default presumption is, wow, the world is a tricky, challenging, scary place. And there's actually nothing wrong with that orientation. It's a reasonable orientation to say, I'm not good enough to make this marriage work or to make this soccer team or to get that contract or to finish, to get to the airport on time. I'm not good enough of a driver to do it. So once we start to put some specific context to I'm not good enough, we get I'm not good enough is really useful and really valid. And if there's this background of as a human, as a citizen, as a spiritual being or any of that kind of stuff, I am not good enough fundamentally, that's outside of an instance of guilt and getting into just straight up shame. For sake of this conversation, I'll use those words in that way. So is that generally clear?
Yes.
Yes.
So if I say, damn it, I am good enough, does that change anything? Yeah, it does change something, But,
momentum.
Huh?
Momentum.
Well, to say I'm good enough, I am good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, it's like, it's not enough to get a job. It's enough to show up at the interview, and it may be enough to, to have somebody say, well, this guy's really earnest, or this, as far as I can tell, they're really confident, they must be competent. But to say I'm not good enough, or to say I am good enough over and over, isn't the same as completing a pilot training program and being a Class A licensed pilot. So it doesn't change my skill set to say I am good enough with great, energy and playing the theme song to Rocky. Dun 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 dun. I'm going to run up the steps of the Pennsylvania whatever, and I'm going to fight because I'm a 133-pound heavyweight boxer. Well, actually, I'm not a very good boxer. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. I'm not that great at boxing.
Is he being a prick again?
Well, I am good at being a prick, though, which is.
Oh, you're amazing.
So I have a sense of humor. I at least I used to. I think I lost it somewhere. It might have been in like I-10. I was on I-10 driving through Texas, and anyway, so I can use language and I can make jokes and I can say confusing, distracting things that can be funny, and I can see. Or I can notice things that other people might not notice, the other people might get more tangled up in. So those are all skills that I do have. And I play guitar well, and I'm not great at whatever sports, and I don't speak. Shelley, did you ever learn any other languages like in your home, like Hindi or something?
No.
Oh. Well,
I
like in Guyana, did you speak anything else there, French or anything?
No, we're the only English speaking country in South America.
Oh, okay, all right.
My grandparents, for some reason, didn't speak Hindi. They
Okay.
didn't want to. In fact,
I
they
just
didn't want to teach the kids Hindi.
I am really, really not very fluent in Russian. However, when I say to myself, I am good enough before I go to the interview with the Russian company to talk to the people who only speak Russian and don't speak English, it really makes a difference in the results that I get. That I've said, I am not good enough with a Russian accent. See, when you say it with the Russian accent, then it makes a difference. So I'm making fun of this idea of I'm good enough or I'm not good enough. It's just one context or one spectrum, and outside of some point of reference, it doesn't have any meaning. So relative to getting a job in engineering with a Russian firm where I'm supposed to speak Russian, I am not good enough. And I'm absolutely okay and open with displaying the fact that I am not good enough to do that. Am I good enough at heart surgery to be a heart surgeon next week? No. Am I good enough to play Stairway to Heaven, on guitar? It depends on... I'm good enough to do it, and then I'm like, well, how precise does somebody want me to duplicate the original? Because I'm like, I'm not really that interested. That's literally my thought at the time was, well, how long do I have to prepare it, and why would I? Why do I care? I'm good enough to do it. I would probably choose not to. But as far as I know, I'm good enough to do it. I actually have never really tried the whole solo or whatever. But I'm quite confident in certain parts of my life. I'm moderately confident in other areas, and I'm completely aware of no competence in certain other areas. So, to recognize disappointment or frustration is one thing. To recognize it in oneself, to recognize it in other people, to be able to support someone in untangling or relaxing something is one skill. My sense is that the more that I practice untangling with other people, the more coherent I will be internally. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the easier it will be for me to maintain mindfulness if I'm, aware of my presumptions and aware of common presumptions, and I've also sorted out my conversations that I'm a little too shy to say with, my client, but I'll run it by my wife, or I'll run it by Daniel, or I'll run it by Shelley, and I'll practice, and we'll do like this role play thing, and I'll say, well, Daniel, would you buy $1,000 a month service for blah 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 if I showed you this? And Daniel would say, oh yeah, I would buy that, or you'd say whatever you'd say. But we can practice, we can rehearse social interaction as far as the example that Shelley gave, and the right way to interact with kids who are injured or in pain or whatever. I think it's important for a young man to be, in our culture, to be able to repress fear and grief. I literally think it's important and a good thing for there to be the ability to repress grief and what else did I say? Pain, fear. Oh, fear. Right. So I think that's useful socially, and it is incredibly valuable. In addition to like all the contexts where we're a young man, in this case, let's go young person. A young person's being told, don't display that in this group. And it's disruptive to the classroom for Daniel to ask questions about the logic of the teacher. And if Daniel's like, you know what, I'm afraid of vaccines. What you just said, I don't think it makes good sense. I don't want one. And to display fear like that, if you do that in a third grade classroom, it's typical that the teacher and the students are going to respond negatively, right? Maybe not in some cases. So it's wonderful if they don't respond negatively. But in a lot of cases, a third grade classroom or even a 10th grade classroom or even Facebook with a bunch of 40-year-old people, there can be quite a outpouring of derision and ridicule for somebody saying, well, I'm afraid about blah, 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 and I'm skeptical about blah, blah, blah. That is risky. In some cases, it's risky, right? I actually don't think gay marriage is an important issue. Okay. So, is that risky? In some cases, the risk involved that I'm suggesting in the latter case would be getting unfriended or something in Facebook. But in a setting of school where you've got peers and, you're with these peers hour after hour, day after day, and you also at some point get that year after year, you're going to be around these same kids your same age, or potentially some of them, you're going to be around these same kids. Your identity within the peer group is important, or the identity for that individual.
To be clear, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yep.
but I only spent, I think, the most 2 or 3 years in certain places. I didn't have any kind of cohesion.
Uh-huh.
It was always 2 or 3 years, and we'd move, and we'd move, and we'd move. So until I got to high school, I moved when I was a freshman in high school. I moved to Pittsburgh. So then I stayed all my high school years here, but all my other schooling was always broken up. You know what I mean? 2, 3 years. I think that is an issue. I mean, for me, it was an issue. It kind of led to some or that helped certain problems I had with blame and guilt and shame and social issues. I'm sorry. That was random.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So it just sets up a different situation. So your experience, Daniel, was different than me expecting to have, the same schools and the same peer group. I lived in Tallahassee from kindergarten through high school and then came back as well after undergraduate college. But the thing about moving still counts. So that affects you. If in 2 months I'm going to be changing, we're moving to a different city and I'm changing schools, I'm never going to see these kids again. Does that affect your social life? I would think so. Maybe not for a 6-year-old a whole lot, but maybe. I don't know. Why not? Just maybe less than for a 12-year-old. But, so...
I actually have read something, Daniel, that, sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
That it's the third most traumatic thing a child can experience. The first being the death of a parent, the second divorce, and the third is a change in environment.
Yeah.
So it makes complete sense that it would have had such an impact on you.
Right. Yeah, and the classic case is the military brats where they move every few years, and I don't really know of any psychological studies about that group of people, but I know that there's a lot of people in that category, and that they talk about it like it's really distinctive about them. They didn't live in one place for 15 years at a time or 10 years at a time, They kept moving.
If they did a study on it, I think they would find that it can lead to antisocial behavior, but only if other underlying conditions are there.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But as far as things like, in our day and age, in the 70s and the 80s and so on, with technology as it was, and, transportation and everything, if you're not going back to some place where you had a friend...
Okay, so I get the point already, but go ahead.
Well, okay, so I'm just noting that in modern situations, people like 12-year-olds use Facebook and text messages and all that. They can stay connected with other people to an extent. They can share photos. They can do things that allow for their social transition to be less abrupt than, okay, pack up your clothes, we're leaving tomorrow. Pack up everything in your room, we're leaving tomorrow. There's that really, dramatic sudden interruption of we're getting evicted and you're divorced. My mom and you are the parents are getting divorced, and we're getting evicted, and you've got to pack up your clothes, and we're moving, and we're sending you off to grandma, and we don't know, by this fall we'll have you somewhere, but we don't know where yet. That kind of a transition is going to be predictably more challenging, more disorienting. So you have all this, just a spectrum of things, right? And so for Daniel to move somewhat frequently during his youth sets up certain skill sets, and also it sets up certain experiences, so it sets up certain skill sets, and it also sets up a probability that certain other skill sets are less likely to develop. And
mind you, it's not just moving from every few years. It's also moving away from family.
Yeah.
There's all those other factors as well.
Right.
So there's that continuancy, or that just. I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it. That sense of all the familiarity is completely disrupted. Yeah.
Yes, that's a better word. Yes.
So there's a lot of ways to say it. What else? So I think I was talking about something, but I'm not sure what it was. Frankly, I know we got some sidetracking, and that's totally fine. Just anybody, if anybody remembers where I was going, feel free to remind me. I was talking about little boys. Yes. Okay, so let's go with that. Kids. So it's useful to be able to hide certain emotions. Does everybody get? It is useful sometimes to be able to hide certain emotions. Okay, we got that. So it's also useful to have sacred relationships where emotions can be expressed. So if a mother of a child can maintain a relationship that allows for the child to privately really reflect with the parent, to privately share, to express grief, to get comfort, that kind of thing, that's an ideal mother-child relationship in my understanding.
I agree. That's my goal.
And you can have that with the grandparent. You can have that with it doesn't have to be family. There's a variety of ways that can happen. But what a wonderful thing if that's your mother who you're with. Even if you do move, you move with your mom, right? Ideally, or again, in the case that you move with your mom, then even if you're in a different town, different friends, whatever, you still have that same mother in your household, and then you go up and you move away and all that stuff. Maybe you're 6 houses down, from another family member, but however far you are geographically or otherwise, the idea that I can find people who are able to support me in learning from my emotional powers and my emotional intensity, that's an odd idea for some people. I don't remember an occasion where I went to my mom or my sister or anybody. I didn't have someone that I can think of to go and confide in or share with. I was pretty repressed. So that was my adaptation, and that allowed me to survive and get by and so on. And then as time went on, I started to encounter people that I felt like I was comfortable confiding in. So I know that was with churches in my own personal history. It was in church groups that I had that experience. So when I moved to Orlando, I met a lady who was 78, and she was not like any other 78-year-old I knew. I didn't know very many. She was not like any woman I knew, and I knew lots of women, and she wasn't really like any person I knew. And I was a volunteer, and she was the local chapter head of some organization. And I liked to volunteer with her because I liked to be around her. She smoked, which I didn't like, but in terms of interacting with her, she was cool. And she was like casual, and I don't know much about her. I don't remember her name. You know, I'm quite confident she's dead by now. But I remember her as a person, and this was when I was like 20 or 21, and I remember whatever the sequence of events was that led to me volunteering to meet her. I was like, I like her. And I don't know if I would have called her and said, hey, I'm having a situation with my girlfriend. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have done that because I'm pretty sure that I would have done that if I felt comfortable doing that. I would have actually called her and done that because I had issues in my life. But my friends, I think of my friend Lowell Saplicki, who lives around Dunedin, Florida, just north of Tampa Bay, St. Pete. Shelley probably knows some of that area. And I have a sense of emotion just thinking of this. It's not like super crazy emotion, but when I was in college, my friend Lowell was such a huge emotional support for me and, you know, such a good friend to me. And I typically would have a small number of friends that I really, you know, connected with. So that was my own history. I knew a lot of people, but I wouldn't necessarily connect with, you know, a lot of people, like a handful of friends. I would typically have one or two good friends, you know. And amongst friends from college, Lowell isn't really a Facebook user. What's his name that I see? Derek. He's actually in Philadelphia area. He and I don't really talk much, but I remember appreciating him and really liking him in college. I don't know, I'm just talking about college somewhat incidentally, but my bandmate, another guy named Jeff, what was his last name? Brond, he was like a really good friend of mine. We listened, he was into Pink Floyd and music that I know, some of which Daniel appreciates, maybe Shelley too, I don't know for sure. But there are people that I think back of with fondness, and I could even say I miss them in a certain sense. But I also have talked to Lowell like 5 years ago, and I'm not really much like there's a lot different between me at 43 and me at 20. So, and there's a lot different between him at 43 and him at 20, or whatever his age is exactly. But I still have a fondness for all the people I just mentioned. In contrast, I've had more of a carried resentment for my adoptive mother. I think you guys are kind of generally aware of that. And so in that case, where I actually am interacting with her still, the interesting thing is that I'm coming to the interactions now more relaxed and leaving more relaxed. Like, that's notable to me. Not that I'm like a friend of hers necessarily, but like we're moving in the direction of friendly interactions, which is not historically, how it was when I was 12 and she was 40 or whatever. So that's an interesting detail. With my birth mother, we've had a lot of friendliness most of our history together. So back to the thing of being able to express emotions and process and reflect and to have, playful sense of humor. I like to do that with the both of you. I do it with other people on Facebook to some extent, but a lot of my other interaction in Facebook is more I'm baiting people. So I'm pretty sure Daniel knows what I mean. Shelley, do you know what I mean?
You're just inviting openness?
Yeah, but I can be challenging, not necessarily sarcastic.
Inviting intelligence and awareness, maybe?
Yeah, and I'm baiting people to be perceptive to irony and logic. I'm like, really? I'm still like, wow, logic's a pretty rare thing amongst modern humans. I'm into it. I like it. I would like to have more interaction with more people who are really into logic. Like, that may seem really odd, but that's my perspective, is that logic is rare and valuable. And So, so I also, you know, a month ago or 3 months ago, I might have been more nourished by exchanging, you know, silly cartoon pictures on Facebook, Daniel. But I did that like yesterday or something, you know, today with you and Harry, right? I think. So I still do it. I may do it less, but I still do it. I still laugh out loud or whatever. You know, I still really am nourished by some of the playful, joking interactions. And yeah, we actually I don't remember how it started, but Harry and Daniel and I were in a private message thing, so it wasn't actually a thread. But what I don't even remember. I know it was like a picture. So somebody had a picture. I don't remember whose it was. It was yours, Daniel? Maybe?
I don't know. What did it say?
I don't know, because the original picture is like so irrelevant now. We went on such a tangent, right? But
okay, you're talking about not the conversation earlier. You're talking about yesterday.
I don't. Within the last 48 hours, some Facebook sequence we did.
Okay, Facebook, not private message. Okay.
Yeah, I don't even remember. Anyway, I just remembered I'm still recording this, so we've got we're like an hour and a half of recording. But so whatever we were talking about or, you know, joking around about, I put up pictures. I don't know if you did, but I know Harry did. And, you know, that collegial joking to me is something that I appreciate. And I miss it because in the sense that I'm not in a school setting or a job setting, because I work from home and I don't even see my clients. A lot of my clients I've never met. So for me, that's actually really something I like, to go onto Facebook and joke around, and we can throw images, you know, and throw videos and links and stuff. You know, we can interact at a certain level that you can't do outside of electronic internet kind of platforms. So I told you guys that I recently was in a potluck and that I talked to a variety of people, and then I was like, you know, really enjoying my conversations with them. I think part of it was that through Facebook and through interacting with my wife and whatever other elements of my life, I've actually gotten better at communication in person by doing less communication in person and doing more in like electronic format where I don't have to have real-time responses. So Daniel, we've talked about real-time wit as distinct from, you know, I see a Facebook post 20 minutes after it's made, 30 minutes after that I think of something really cool to put on it, and I go and put it on there, and then everybody laughs and likes it. And we can go at whatever pace we want. Real time is no longer an issue. And that is an interesting contrast. So I'm not going anywhere particular with my comments at this point, other than like it's human to experience guilt, fear, embarrassment, grief, all these things. It's human and useful to repress them, and it's also just delightful sometimes to joke around and, you know, even just express intense stories with no silliness in them. So thank you guys. It's going on 1 year time. So any comments you guys want to make before we start the second half?
Appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
And I'd like to request the second half be like in a week. But I appreciate everything too, yes.
All right. Very good. I'm going to stop the recording here. And